Hello. My name is Jessica Lamb. I work here at TIFF. I work on the adult learning team, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's screening of Lan Yu with our special guest, Shana Ye. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that tonight's event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe. As an organization that's dedicated to the moving image, we are always grateful when we have the opportunity to screen and support First Nations, Inuit, and Métis filmmakers. The next opportunity to do so will be on November 12th, which is part of an event we're hosting with the NFB. We will be screening as part of a shorts program, Woman Dress, which is the latest short film from an Indigenous filmmaker named Thurza Cuthind. And we hope that you can join us. I would also like to thank, on behalf of TIFF, our lead sponsor, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and our public supporters, Ontario Creates and the Canada Council for the Arts. As a charitable organization, we would also like to thank our donors and our members because their support makes our year-round educational and community initiatives possible. Tonight's event is part of our retrospective Seeing the Unseen, Re-Encountering Chinese Cinema, programmed by filmmaker and curator Betty Z. The series runs until October 18th, so pretty much a screening every day until then. So if you would like to check out what else is playing as part of this series, please visit our website at tiff.net. It is now my pleasure to introduce our special guest for this evening. Shana Ye is an assistant professor in the Women and Gender Studies Institute at the University of Toronto. Her research areas are transnational feminism, queer studies, post-socialist studies, and theories of affect and trauma. She is currently working on her first book, Red Father, Pink Sun, which is an ethnography-informed dystopian novel on queerness, the rise of China, and the politics of memory. She also plays guitar and practices martial arts. So please join me in welcoming Shana Ye to the stage.
Okay, I hope this stays right where it is. Right? All right, so thanks, Jessica, for the opening remarks. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the event organizer, Keith and Chris, and also Jessica at TIFF for providing me this wonderful opportunity to share some of my thoughts and readings of the film with the Torontonian film lovers. So I kind of grown up with this film. So I'm sure rewatching this movie will turn up lots of good adolescence memory. As some of you probably have already known, the film Lan Yu is adapted from the internet novel Beijing 故事, Beijing Story, by the author under the pseudonym Beijing 同志, so Beijing Comrade. 同志 is also an expression for homosexuals, especially gay men in Chinese. And one of the protagonists, Handong, in this film, in his own telling, his name actually means defending Chairman Mao Zedong's thought. So we've already seen lots of communist connotations here. I first read the novel Beijing 故事 online in 1998 when I was a middle schooler. So the author couldn't find a publisher in mainland China who's willing to publish the book given the explicit depiction of sexuality and is referencing of the Tiananmen Square massacre. So they decided to post this novel on a Chinese online literature forum called Yifan. Although the film is mainly about mainland China, the availability of the novel online actually invited a larger queer readership scattered in and outside of China. Especially Stanley Kwan's adaptation of the film brought it to an even larger transnational audience. That's why we're here now today. So I watched the film in 2001 when it first came out. Back then, of course, there was no official copy available in mainland China. So if you want to watch these prohibited movie, you had to go to these private street vendors. So I remember my friend and I would go to these vendors under the overpass or at the subway station, and we would like whisper to the sellers, "Hey, do you have Lan Yu?" And the vendors will be like, "Oh, Lan Yu, so you mean the Blue Universe or the Blue Island?" So that kind of like a educational scientist movie, and we're like, no, like the you know that the homosexual movie, and these vendors will be like, "Oh, wow, we are not that kind of sellers. Maybe you want to go like check out next door the pornography section." So anyway, my mom's sitting in the audience, so I'm not gonna go to that pornography direction. So the first copy I watched was actually a copy recorded by someone with the handheld camera in a theater. So probably when it was first premiered in Hong Kong. The quality of the film was so bad, and I even didn't get a chance to see the ending. So since the inception, there have been lots of discussions and debate around the ownership of the story. It is a mainland film, since it's actually produced and shot in Beijing and is sponsored by mainland money, or is it a Hong Kong or Sinophone film, since it's directed by a Hong Kong director and the theme song is performed by a Taiwanese singer Huang Pinyuan. It is interesting to see how the production process and the circulation of the film have generated lots of different fantasies in the Chinese-speaking world, in and outside of China. And it's also interesting to reflect on what it actually means to claim the nationality of the film. So since the theme of the film series is seeing the unseen re-encounter the Chinese cinema, I want to organize this introductory talk around 3 entry points to approach this topic. So firstly, I'd like to talk about how the emergence of LGBT identity and representation in post-socialist visual culture are actual mirrors of the elusive political history of China. And then I want to address some of the understandings or perhaps misunderstanding of the class division in the film. And then I want to point to some of the sexist and misogynist portrayed in the film in particular, and also sexism and misogyny that informed and characterized much articulation of queerness and representation of queer desires in Chinese queer cinema. So first off, queer desires as a reflection of the political events. Perhaps one of the reasons I was drawn to this movie as a teenager was not so much about seeing 2 handsome men making out on screen, but the film's vivid reference of the 1989 Tiananmen Square political upheaval, a history largely repressed and remained unaware of to the generation born after the 90s. Queerness in Kwan's movie come to function as a critical tool for evaluating not only the contemporary emergence of non-normative sexuality in post-socialist China, but also as a means of remembering the elusive history and making visible the collective trauma associated with China's post-1978 reform. To make this point clear, I want to draw your attention to a scene occurred one third of the way through the film. Sorry for those who hasn't watched the movie, they're gonna be a little bit spoiler here. So in this scene, Lan Yu is unable to tolerate Handong's infidelity and has separated from him. It is June 1989, on the eve of the Tiananmen incident. Handong's brother-in-law warned Handong, They are clearing the square, and if you have any friends on the square, tell them to pull out. As he heads out Handong's office, he adds, "Oh, I forgot to say, I saw your friend Lan Yu at the square today, keeping order in the crowd." Agitated and unable to fall asleep that night, Handong drives to the square and searches for Lan Yu, whom he hasn't seen for months. The military offensive is never shown on screen. Instead, is heard, is signaled acoustically by the rumbling of gunfire, and then by the sudden rush of a series of blurred images, a flash of cyclists and injured people fleeing in the night. Unable to find Lan Yu, Handong drives to Lan Yu's dorm and falls asleep behind the wheel of his Mercedes. In the end, the violence of the incident doesn't appear visually in the film, but displays onto the image of a beaten and bloodied Lan Yu. Handong relieves and claps the sobbing Lan Yu in a long overdue embrace. This scene connects queer love to the political, suggesting that true love only comes at the moment of the political calamity, and the otherwise repressed political desire in post-socialist China found its way to surface through love. This displacement of queer desire onto the political offers a leeway to access what is elided, providing agency to remember and to recall history. Homosexuals' expressive desire has always assumed a central role in articulating China's relations with Western modernity. Starting from the early 90s, gay men in China understand themselves as at the forefront of a new humanity who breaks free from the old socialist and Maoist ideology, but to embrace Western democracy, individualism, free market, and cosmopolitan worldliness. This is well demonstrated in the film. For example, in the scene of Handong and Lan Yu's first sexual encounter, Lan Yu sits undressed watching an English TV program about Los Angeles while waiting for Handong finishing his shower. Lan Yu asks, "Sir, have you been to the United States?" Handong doesn't answer Lan Yu's question directly, and the next scene we see is actually Lan Yu lying in bed naked after their sex. The gay desire is set up through the desire for the West, epitomized by Los Angeles in the United States. And it's also through the realization of gay sex, both Lan Yu and Handong's cosmopolitan longing are realized. But here I want to point out that linking queer desire and the political as both mirrors of the past and beacon for the future is a double-edged sword. In the age of queer liberalism, discourse of homosexuality and LGBT rights are often used as the barometer to measure China's political progress, human rights, and proper place in the New World. The argument that the globalization of capitalism will stimulate economic development and consequently promote political progress and social enlightenment in China itself has a long colonial genealogy. So I would like to invite the audience to think about what it actually means for homosexuality as a sanctioned body of Western standard knowledge that function as a cultural ideal, political roadmap, and moral compass for an emergent gay subjectivity in China, and how we can situate culturally and historically specific understandings of sexuality without reproducing the narrative of oppression embedded in long-standing colonial and Cold War thinking. Next, I want to talk about some understandings or misunderstanding of the class of the main characters, Lan Yu and Handong. Far from defending Mao Zedong thought, Handong is actually the representative of an emerging capitalist class in a rapidly globalizing China in the 80s. From the opening scene, we learn that the Handong's company is worth over 100 million yuan, a phenomenon sum both then and now. And as the narrative unfolds, we found out that Handong is the eldest son of a well-placed governmental official in China. He's part of the new rich in China who have profited from his ties to the country's ruling class. Through the economic reform and privatization, they were able to transfer vast amount of national property to private individuals and families. The new urban class in the coastal large cities make up less than 1% of the national population, however, controls at least half of the nation's gross income. This type of capitalism coming together through the Chinese guanxi, which means network, has been labeled as Confucian capitalism, underwrites Handong's interaction with Lan Yu. In this film, Handong reduced their relationship as merely exchange. In contrast, Lan Yu, a poor college student from the rural northeast, although accepting Handong's luxury gift from money, clothes to cars and villa, reject to use these gift, therefore rejecting the traditional Marxist thinking of circulation. This rejection allows many viewers and scholars to view Lan Yu as representing the outdated socialist pre-modern hoarder or the working class dispossessed by the reform. In this way, the tragic, without further spoiler, the tragic of gay love can be read as a national allegory for the tragic of capital, as well as a sharp critique of social inequality caused by China's economic reform. Although this reading is compelling, I want to further complicate the narrative of gay love as reflecting the conflicts between socialism and capitalism. In the novel, although Lan Yu is first introduced to us as a poor college student, we learn that Lan Yu is actually from a second-tier city in the northwest, whose parents are both college teachers who failed during the market reform. So regarding where the location where Lan Yu actually from, there are a whole bunch of discussion on the domestic colonialism and the Cultural Revolution about the new frontier, but this is not what we're going to talk about here today. Lan Yu himself is a student in architecture at Tsinghua University, which is the most prestigious university in China, who has a bright future guaranteed in front of him in the 90s when China undergone intensified urbanization, mass infrastructure development, and global expansion. So both Handong and Lan Yu exemplify unique classes of China's emergent economy, the class of Confucian capitalists and the class of intellectual 资产阶级. But this crucial reading of class is slipped off from Kwan's adaptation as well as from most readers' understanding of the film through the romanticization of Lan Yu as the innocent poor. So I wonder what actually made Kwan and many readers of the novel conveniently and willingly unsee Lan Yu's class. And what do we gain if we see the film Lan Yu with a renewed perspective of class beyond the capitalist sugar daddy and socialist poor money boy binary? And I will leave you, the audience, to decide. Last but not least, so I know you're probably already tired of me, even though I haven't been tired of myself. I can just go on and on. But I just want to quickly point out some of the controversies and the critiques of sexism and misogyny reflected in the film. Perhaps some of you have already known, although the story of Lan Yu is told from Handong's perspective, the realistic style could be taken as a memoir. The author of the original novel is actually a woman living in the United States and now in Canada. When the rumor about the author's identity first came out in the early 2000s, there were tremendous doubt and denial of the identity of the gender of the author. Many gay men try to make sense of this information by speculating that the author wrote the novel based on interviews of Handong, or she was the proxy writer, the real author hired to withhold his identity. This doubt, denial, and even anger and rage in the Chinese gay community raise important questions about the authenticity of Chinese gay identity. Is it even possible that the best gay love novel of China is written by a woman who never experiences that? Could the gender of the author discredit the truthfulness of gayness in China? If the story were only a gay version of a Cinderella fabricated by a woman, that it still hold the same significance, and could it still function as a cry for social acceptance and equality? Among all the questions and denials of women's role played in the emergence of gay literature, visual representation, and identity, what I found the most striking and perhaps perplexing is the brutish sexism and misogyny larded in the novel and also the film themselves. Not only the depiction of a female character in this movie is very thin and stereotypical, the agency of coming to gay identity of both characters is built upon and through gender-based prejudice and the denouncement of women. For example, we know Handong started to play with men after he's tired of playing with women. In his own telling, the man who fucks other men makes him a real man. So I like the characters, I like Handong in this film because Lan Yu is the first gay film I watched that opens doors for my own understandings of my life and brought me to what I do here as a queer scholar. But in real life, I wouldn't want to be friends with Handong because he really acts like an a-hole. So, as you will see, the heteronormative violence against gay men, rooted from both the familial traditions in China and capitalism, found its easy scapegoats in women. The societal pressure gay men face is displaced onto figures such as Handong's materialist and manipulative wife and conservative mother, without any further interrogation of the living condition of gay or bisexual men and their wives. And this type of plot and narrative is very common in many early gay literature and cinema. So that being said, I still enjoy this beautifully shot and narrated story, and I hope you all do as well. And I hope my brief introduction can provide some light from a different angle to illuminate some of the unseen shadows in the film. Right. Thank you.